On July 27, 1981, a busy Florida afternoon, a mother turns her back for just a few minutes. When she turns around again, her 6-year-old son is gone. What happens next will change how an entire country protects its children, and it starts with a scream inside a department store. This is the chilling story of Adam Walsh. It all began on a hot summer day in Hollywood, Florida. Rev Walsh had errands to run, and like a lot of parents in 1981, she brought her 6-year-old son Adam along with her to the Sears store inside the Hollywood Mall. Adam was a happy kid. He had blonde hair, a big smile, and the kind of energy that made strangers smile back at him. That day, Sears had a display of video games set up near the front of the store, and Adam begged his mother to let him play for a few minutes, while she shopped just a few aisles away. It seemed harmless. Kids did this all the time back then. Malls felt safe. Stores felt safe. Rev told him to stay right there, and she walked off to look at lamps, just a short distance away, still inside the same store. What she didn't know was that a group of older boys had gathered around that same video game display. An argument broke out between the boys over whose turn it was to play. A store security guard walked over to break it up, and instead of separating just the older boys, he told the entire group, including Adam, that they had to leave the store. Adam was ushered outside, alone, 6 years old, standing in a parking lot outside a busy mall, while his mother was still just a few aisles away, completely unaware that her son was no longer inside the building. When Rev finished at the lamp display and walked back to get Adam, he wasn't there. At first, she wasn't panicked. She figured he had wandered off to another part of the store, the way kids do. She checked the toy section. She checked the exits. Minutes turned into an hour. An hour turned into something far more terrifying. Store employees searched the building. Mall security was notified. And soon it became clear that Adam Walsh was not anywhere inside that mall. The Hollywood Police Department was called, and within hours what started as a missing child report turned into one of the largest searches in South Florida history. Police, volunteers, and eventually the FBI combed through the mall, the parking lot, nearby neighborhoods, and canals throughout the area. Flyers went up. News crews arrived. Adam's photo, with his gap-toothed smile, was suddenly everywhere. His father, John Walsh, a hotel executive at the time, dropped everything and threw himself into the search with a desperation that would define the rest of his life. He walked the streets. He knocked on doors. He begged anyone who would listen for information. Nobody had answers. Days passed with no sign of Adam. Investigators followed leads that went nowhere. Witnesses reported seeing a young boy matching Adam's description at various places, but none of it led police any closer to finding him. The Walsh family clung to hope, the kind of hope that refuses to imagine the worst, even as the days dragged into a second week with no word. Then, on August 10, 1981, 16 days after Adam disappeared, 2 fishermen were working along a canal near Vero Beach, Florida, more than 100 miles north of Hollywood. In the water, they discovered the remains of a small child. Investigators were called to the scene, and within days, dental records confirmed the unthinkable. The remains belonged to Adam Walsh. Only his head had been recovered. The rest of his body was never found, despite extensive searches of the surrounding waterways. The news shattered the country. A 6-year-old boy, taken from a busy store in broad daylight, had been murdered, and his killer had vanished without a trace. For John and Rev Walsh, the search for their son was over. But the search for the truth was only just beginning, and it would take decades to get even partial answers. In the early stages of the investigation, police struggled. This was 1981. There were no cell phones, no security cameras on every corner, no national database for missing children, no Amber Alert system. Investigators were working almost blind. Leads dried up quickly, and as weeks turned into months, the case went cold. For the Walsh family, the silence was its own kind of torment. They didn't just lose their son. They watched the system that was supposed to protect children fail at nearly every level. From mall security policies to police coordination between jurisdictions. Rather than collapse under the grief, John Walsh made a decision that would reshape the rest of his life. He became an advocate, first for missing children, and eventually for crime victims across the country. In 1988, he became the host of a new television show called America's Most Wanted, a program that profiled unsolved crimes and fugitives, asking the public to help catch criminals that police alone couldn't find. The show became a phenomenon, credited with helping capture hundreds of fugitives over the years. John Walsh also helped found the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an organization that transformed how missing children cases are handled in the United States, creating standardized procedures that police departments still use today. Every time you see a missing child alert flash across a screen, that system exists partly because of what happened to Adam. But even as his father built a legacy, meant to protect other families, the question of who actually killed Adam Walsh remained unanswered for over 25 years. Investigators looked at multiple suspects over the decades. Tips came in from around the country. Confessions were made and later withdrawn. The case bounced between different theories, and for a long time, it seemed like the truth might never surface. One name kept resurfacing throughout the investigation: Otis Toole. Toole was a drifter with a long history of violence. A man who had already confessed to numerous murders alongside his partner, Henry Lee Lucas, one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. In the years following Adam's murder, Toole confessed to killing him, describing details that seemed to match the case. But then, just as investigators thought they had their answer, Toole recanted his confession. Over the following years, he would confess again, then take it back again, creating a maddening cycle that left prosecutors unable to build a case strong enough to charge him. Without physical evidence directly tying Toole to the crime, and with his statements constantly changing, authorities were stuck. Toole was never formally charged in connection with Adam's murder. In 1996, he died in prison while serving time for unrelated crimes, taking whatever certainty he had with him to the grave. For over a decade after Toole's death, the Adam Walsh case remained technically unsolved on paper. Even though many investigators believed Toole was responsible, the Walsh family lived with that uncertainty, never getting the final official confirmation they had waited so long to hear. Finally, in December of 2008, the Hollywood Police Department held a press conference that the Walsh family had waited 27 years for. Investigators announced they were officially closing the case, naming Otis Toole as the man who abducted and murdered Adam Walsh. They cited the accumulation of evidence gathered over decades, including Toule's own statements, similarities in his other crimes, and information from people who had known him. Because Toole had already died years earlier, there would be no trial, no courtroom moment, no chance for the Walsh family to hear a jury deliver a guilty verdict. The case was closed based on the totality of the evidence, not a confirmed forensic match, and that distinction has left some questions lingering even today. Some investigators and journalists who followed the case closely have pointed out that there was never definitive physical evidence, like connecting Toole to the crime scene. The official closing of the case gave the Walsh family a sense of resolution. But for true crime researchers, a small shadow of doubt has never fully disappeared. What is certain is the impact Adam's death had on the country. In 2006, President George W. Bush signed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act into law, creating a national sex offender registry and strengthening laws designed to protect children from predators. The legislation stands as one of the most significant child protection laws in American history, and it carries Adam's name into every state in the country. John Walsh continued his advocacy work for decades, eventually creating additional television programs focused on catching criminals and helping victims' families find closure. Rev. Walsh became an advocate in her own right, working alongside her husband to push for legislative changes and to support other parents living through the unimaginable. Today, Adam Walsh's story is taught in criminal justice courses, referenced in true crime documentaries, and remembered as the case that changed how missing children investigations are handled in America. The mall where he disappeared has since been demolished, but the story of what happened there has never faded from public memory. For the Walsh family, the pain of losing Adam never truly went away, even decades later. What they built out of that pain saved an untold number of other children from similar fates, even if it could never bring their own son back. Somewhere in Florida, a canal still runs quietly past where fishermen once made a discovery that broke a nation's heart. A 6-year-old boy walked into a department store one summer afternoon and never walked back out. And in the decades since, his name has become inseparable from the fight to keep every other child safe. Adam Walsh never got to grow up. But because of what happened to him, countless children who will never know his name are alive today.